Hello, I am Nilay Rathod, and in cultural studies, I am going to present on cultural studies and its four goals. So, starting with definition of cultural studies. So, M.H. Abraham, in his glossary of literary terms, explains that cultural study designates a cross-disciplinary enterprise for analyzing the conditions that affect the production, reception, and cultural significance of all types of institutions, practices, and products. Among these, literature is accounted as merely one of many forms of cultural signifying practices. A chief concern is to specify functioning of social, economical, and political forces, power structure that are said to produce the diverse forms of cultural phenomena and to endow them with their social meanings, their acceptance as truth, the modes of discourse in which they are discussed, and their relative values and status. According to Dictionary of Critical Theories, cultural studies is an interdisciplinary approach to the study and analysis of culture, understood very broadly to include not only specific texts but also practices and indeed ways of life. In this, the most influential works are, according to Ian Buchanan, Lawrence Grossberg, Carrie Nelson, Paula Treitler, uh, Treitler's The Mammoth Cultural Studies, and introductory textbook like John Fiske's Reading the Popular. These works reflect not only the heterogeneous nature of work calling itself cultural studies, but the fact that in a very real sense, cultural studies is theoretically provisional and avant-garde. As Patrick Bartlinger has pointed out, that cultural studies is not a tightly coherent, unified movement with fixed agenda, but it is a loosely coherent group of tendencies, issues, and questions arising from social turmoil of the 1960s. Cultural studies is composed of elements of Marxism, post-structuralism, and postmodernism, feminism, gender studies, anthropology, sociology, race, ethnic study, film theory, urban study, public policy, popular culture studies, and post-colonial studies. So here Patrick is saying that cultural studies is not tightly coherent, meaning he is saying that cultural study is not studying only the culture, but only one culture, but it is also studying many different works on and the theories like Marxism and so on. Cultural studies was initially developed by British Marxist academics, Birmingham University, and it was first also established in the Birmingham University, and so that term came to known as a Birmingham School of Cultural Studies. Cultural studies avoidedly and even radically interdisciplinary and can sometimes be seen as anti-disciplinary. A key concern for cultural studies practitioners is the examination of the forces within through which socially organized people conduct and participate in the construction of their everyday lives. A cultural study as a field was when Richard Hobart used the term in 1964 in founding the Center of Contemporary Cultural Studies at University of Birmingham. Four goals. First is cultural study transcend the confines confines of a particular discipline such as literary criticism, meaning it is multidisciplinary. Second, cultural study is politically engaged. Third, cultural studies denies the separation of high and low culture or elite and popular culture. Fourth, cultural study analyzes not only the cultural work but also means of production. So the first one, that is cultural study transcend confines of a particular discipline. So cultural study is not bound by any discipline or a field, but As editor Lawrence Crossberg Nelson and has emphasized that intellectual promises of cultural studies lies in attempt to cut across diverse social political interests and address many of the struggles within current scenes. Cultural study combines variety of political engaged critical approaches drawn including semiotic Marxism, feminism theory, anthropography, post-structuralism, post-colonialism, social theory, film video studies, and many of the media studies. Cultural studies are interdisciplinary, which means that they are not restricted to any one domain, but also include the critic's personal relationship to the discipline being analyzed. Henry Gero and other write in their Dalhousie Review Manifesto that cultural studies practitioners are resisting intellectuals who see what they do as emancipatory project because it erodes the traditional disciplinary divisions in most institutions or higher education. Second, it is politically engaged. So now we are going to see that how it is politically engaged. As we know that society operates in within many structures. One of them is a culture, politics, religion, and so on. So here we can see that culture and political structure are somewhere within woven together. Society is formed into power of hierarchy, which raises issue of social inequality or power as a system of symbol. As Wilfred Buren has noticed, cultural studies questions inequalities within power structure and seeks to discover models for restructuring relationship among dominant and a minority or subaltern discourse because meaning and individual subjectivity are culturally constructed. They can thus be reconstructed. Michel Foucault, a French philosopher, is considered as an influential theorist of power and knowledge and how they are used as a form of social control. So, Jonathan Gaventa remarks his works marks a radical departure from previous modes of conceiving power and cannot be easily integrated with previous idea as power is diffuse rather than concentrated, embodied and enacted rather than possessed, recursive rather than purely coercive, and constitutes against agents rather than being deployed by them. Further, he explained that for Foucault, power is neither wielded by individual nor by classes nor institution. In fact, power is not wielded at all. Instead, it is seen as a dispersed and a subjectless as element of broad strategies but without individual authors. Power is ubiquitous and appears in every moment of social relations, and the operation of power are not a departure from norms, or rather is constantly present. Power is everywhere, not because it embraces everything, but because it comes from everywhere. Power is not an institution, nor a structure, nor a possession. It is name we give to a complex strategy situation in a particular society. In cultural study, power structure is being studied as far as a political aspect is concerned, but power doesn't always have to be negative. Jonathan Gavin elaborates that power is not necessarily repressive, prohibitive, negative, or inclusionary, although it can be all of these things. It is also positive, like Foucault is saying, we must cease once and for all to describe the effect of power in negative terms. It excludes, it represses, it censors, it abstracts, it masks, it conceals. In fact, power produces reality. It produces domain of objects and ritual of truth. The individual and the knowledge that may be gained by him belong to this production. Power can be of any source: wealth, state force, state action, social norms, idea, or mass. So, as Foucault has said that power is not to be wielded and it does not come from any one source. So, here we can see that as this source is like mass or social norms. So, the mass, like a public, is creating a force, not an individual, but mass is creating a force. So, thus the power it come to existence. Cultural study denies the separation of high and low, or elite or popular culture. There is no such thing as high or low culture in discipline of cultural study. As people have moved around the world, so have their tradition and their culture. In the words of Wilfred Guren, being a cultured person used to mean being acquainted with highbrow art and intellectual pursuits. So, as we know that many of the we have listened many of the time, I am cultured or I am listening to culture, art, or music. So here Guran is saying that it used to happen, now it is not happening, but it is not like that. In For cultural critics, there is no such thing as high or low culture, but it is original popular culture. But Guran is also questioning that, but it isn't culture also to be found with a pair of tickets to a popular to a rock concert. So he is talking about popular culture. Popular culture emerged in 19th century, and as it is believed that it was culture of lower education and lower class, which was opposing the official culture, which was upper class with higher education. While some may consider pop culture to be the culture of younger generation, this is not how a cultural critic will perceive or comprehend it. Take music industries for example. Many pop stars are held in a much higher esteem than a classical music composer, but it is important to remember that both are equally important to the cultural world, and to ignore one would mean ignoring the huge chunk of culture means of production. The fourth purpose is to closely relate to Marxism, since both Marxism and critics examine capitalism, consumerism, and so on, which is based on money and capitalism. People might be at a loss as long as the company is profitable. So, uh, the view of capitalist person would be like company should be at profit. Whatever people are doing, it not is a concern of a company. So capitalism is not concerned with the profit or well-being of people. It is about the people. It is not about the people, but it's about money. Marxist critic have long recognized the importance of such uh, paraliterary questions as this: who supports a given artist, who publishes his or her books, and how are these books distributed, who buys these books, for that matter, who is literary and who is not. So, in Marxists have questioned this a long time, and we can see that whatever things we are doing, we are creating a certain pattern in our daily life. So, cultural critics are following or analyzing this pattern. Jeremy Gilbert noted in this issue, cultural studies must be grapple with the fact that we now live in an era when, throughout the capitalist world, the overriding aim of government economics policy is to maintain consumers' splendid level. This is an era when consumer confidence is treated as the key indicator and cause of economic effectiveness. Gramsci modified classical Marxism and argued that culture must be understood as a key site of political and social struggle. In his view, capitalists used not only brute force, that is prison, law, prison, police, military repression, and so on to maintain control, but also penetrated the everyday culture of working people in a variety of ways in their efforts to win popular consent. Stuart, Hall's, Stuart Hall has also noted for Gramsci historical leadership or hegemony involves the formation of alliance between class faction and struggles within the cultural and real of important to understand hegemony was always for Gramsci and interminable, unstable and constrained process. Scott Lesh writes that in the work of Hall, Abdich and McRobbie, popular culture came to the uh, fore. Came for what Gramsci gave to this was the importance of constant and culture. If fundamental Marxists saw power in the terms of class versus class, then Gramsci gave to us the question of class alliance. The rise of cultural studies itself was based on the decline of prominence of fundamental class versus class politics. So, as I have already mentioned, that we people are working in a certain pattern. So, like we have seen the social dilemma, there they have talked about how AI or the software is working in a way that the software is able to locate our everyday and every second's movement, and it is possible by a certain pattern like we have created. So that is also applicable to this cultural studies that whatever pattern we are creating, we are giving a chance to the system or a mass to uh, come forward and comprehend our pattern and make it in a way that that can lead to make a make a state of force that can lead to a situation like 1984, like we have seen that 1984 is a totalitarian government, and there is a we can see the state's force in this that novel. So that was all these are work cited.
So, Nilay, my question is, according to you, are these four goals are connected to each other or not?
Are these four goals are connected with each other or not? In a way, yes, they are connected, as we have seen that cultural study is interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. So cultural discipline or studies is not focusing on any one field or discipline, but it is focusing on many such disciplines like Marxism and feminist criticism and so on. So these four goals are like politically engaged, multidisciplinary, means of production and so on are interlinked together.
Nilay, what is the ultimate goal of cultural studies?
The ultimate goal of the cultural study, we can say that is to bring forward the very archetype or skeleton of our culture. So we can say it is trying to convey or comprehend that whatever flaws and whatever lacks are there in our culture or in us, cultural study is trying to bring forward these flaws. So that's all. Thank you.